Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Mishnapad Paramahansa Parivajakaacharya Ashtottara Sri Srimad's Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajakaacharya Ashtottara Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. We're going to see if you can get them pretty quietly. Keep the doors closed. Yeah. On this 7th day of October, 2024 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 13, Nature, the Enjoyer and Consciousness. Text 5, page 534.
Hare Krishna, 13.4.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, is that Chad?
Yeah, sorry no one was there to set up today, it looks like, huh?
Yeah, but it sounds like you're doing okay.
Doing okay.
Okay, good. All right, he's right. Text 4, page 533. Tat Chaitram Yach Chayadriksha Yadvikadi Yataschayat Sachayo Yat Prabhavascha Tat Samasena Meshunu Tat Chaitram Yachayadriksha Yadvikadi Yataschayat Sachayo Yat Prabhavascha Tat Samasena Meshunu Tat Chaitram Yachayadriksha Yad Vikari Yataschayat Sachayo yat prabhavascha tatsamasena me shunu tatchetram yatcha yadrikcha yad vikari yatascha yat sachayo yat prabhavascha tatsamasena me shunu. Madhava. Tat-kṣetram yatcha yadrikcha yad-vikari yatascha yat tachayo yat prabhavascha tatsamasena me shunu. Tat-kṣetram yatcha yadrikcha yad-vikari yatascha yat sachayo yat prabhavascha tatsamasena me shunu. Mani, you want to chant? Okay, you can do it. Tat-kṣetram yatcha yadrikcha yad-vikari yatascha yat sachayo yat prabhavascha tatsamasena me shunu. Chad, you want to try?
kṣetra-jña yadrikcha
Tat-kṣetram yatcha yadrikcha
yad-vikari yatascha yad
yad-vikari yatascha yat
sachayo yat prabhavascha
sachayo yat prabhavascha
tatsamasena me shrinu.
tatsamasena me shunu. Anyone else?
Tat-kṣetram yadrikcha
Tat-kṣetram yatcha yadrikcha
yad-vikari yatascha yat
yad-vikari yatascha yat
sachayo yat prabhavascha
sachayo yat prabhavascha
tatsamasena me shunu.
tatsamasena me shunu. Go ahead. Tat-kṣetram yatcha yadrikcha yad-vikari yatascha yat sachayo yat prabhavascha tatsamasena me shunu. Oh, brother, go in the make sure all the kitchen door is closed and this other door is closed. There's some child in the kitchen, I think.
I'm sorry, that's my child.
Oh, that's your child? Where?
In the bathroom, he's potty trained.
Oh, in the bathroom. Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
When he's finished, we plan on leaving. It's
Oh,
not
okay.
going to be much longer.
Okay, okay.
I'm sorry.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
All right. Word by word meanings. I'll just read it myself. Read along. Tat, that, chetam, field of activities. Yat, what, cha, also, yadrik, as it is, cha, also, yat, having what, vikari, changes, yataha, from which, cha, also, yat, what, saha, he, cha, also, yaha, who, yat, having what, prabhavaha, influence, cha, also, tat, that, samasena, in summary, may, from me, shunu, understand. Translation. Krishna says to Arjuna, now please hear my brief description of this field of activity and how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activities is, and what his influences are. Purport. The Lord is describing the field of activities and the knower of the field of activities in their constitutional positions. One has to know how this body is constituted, the materials of which this body is made, under whose control this body is working, how the changes are taking place, where from the changes are coming, what the causes are, what the reasons are, what the ultimate goal of the individual soul is, and what the actual form of the individual soul is. One should also know the distinction between the individual living soul and the supersoul, their different influences, their potentials, etc. One just has to understand this Bhagavad Gita directly from the description given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all this will be clarified. But one should be careful not to consider the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every body to be one with the individual soul, the jiva. This is something like equating the potent and the impotent. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So we need to put this in context, and Krishna is systematically answering Arjuna's questions at the beginning of the chapter, where he says, Prakatam Purusham Chaiva. Arjuna said, my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the object of knowledge. And so then Krishna starts answering the questions. This body of son of Kunti is called the field, a kṣetra, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. O Sayana Bharat, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies, and to understand this body and its knower being the individual and the soul and supersoul, is called knowledge. That is my opinion. And then today's verse, now please hear my brief description of the field of activity and how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it's produced, etc. So Krishna is going to describe, answer these questions systematically. And this chapter is the first chapter after the middle six. Prabhupada explained that chapters 7 through 12 are the essence of the Gita. And these subject matters, they've been mentioned before. We've learned something about what is Prakriti, what is the body, and all these things. But now there'll be more detail, so that we can fit it into the whole scheme of what Krishna described in those middle six chapters, which ends with the chapter just on devotional service, the essence of the whole thing. So now he's kind of backtracking a little bit, and he's going to go into more deal. What is Prakriti? What is Prakriti? What is this material nature? We already learned in chapter 7 that there's 8 different elements to the material nature. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, space, mind, intelligence, and ego. Okay, she's been reading the books. And they're progressively more subtle. And sometimes we don't think, the mind and intelligence, that must be spiritual, right? We deal with that. But no, those are all also material. The spiritual element is the soul in the body. And it works through, in the conditioned state, which we all are, it works through a body made of these elements. And we can easily see, we got solid matter in here, we got bones and so many things, flesh, and then there's water, so many liquids going through, the blood, and we drink a lot of water and so forth. Air, we're breathing air in and out. Fire, the fire of digestion, that's also considered a fire. And then the more subtle earth, water, fire, air, and then ether. Ether is the space in which everything is contained. It's a very subtle element. And then you have these subtle ones in mind, intelligence, and ego, ego simply means the sense of self. And it's called ahankar, or false ego, in the conditioned state, because we're thinking we're something we're not. And this is the root cause of all our problems. We're convinced we're this body, but we're not. This body that we're living in now is different from the body we had yesterday. Right? We're going through so many bodies. We were all like 8 years old, right? We remember a few things from that, right? And then we were all 15, a different body, right? We grew higher, our mind we got knew so many different things. And then it continues as you go on. So eventually this body falls. Everyone knows it. You don't die though. That the living entity never dies, which is, in one sense, a great relief. Oh, I'm not going to die. But if you're bodily conscious, then you're going to feel that you're dying. This is the problem. For someone who's self-realized, and even from our own compatriots and contemporaries, I've seen devotees who've left their body and being fully Krishna conscious, surrounded by devotees reminding them of Krishna, and it's very peaceful. And I happen to have experience working in a hospital back in the early 70s as an inhalation therapist, someone who takes around the bags and plugs in and tries, And I've seen, because this person had a heart attack, you're trying to save them, but they can't. And practically in every case, unless they're heavily sedated, they're not conscious, people are just terrified. They don't know what's going to happen. And according to the Shastra, if you've been very sinful, you see the representatives of Yamaraj, who's the judge, ready to drag you out of the body and take you to the other place, so to speak. So it's a very frightening experience. But for a devotee who's cultivated Krishna consciousness, even if you're not completely pure, you're confident that you'll continue your Krishna consciousness in the next body, because those assets are not lost. Anything you have that's material, we understand. You have a big bank balance. It doesn't matter. You may be a billionaire or some poor guy on the street. You're going to leave. The homeless guy is going to leave his shopping cart behind, and Bezos is going to leave his billions behind. But you don't have anything anymore. It's all, and you go into another body, you start from scratch. So we're enjoined in Krishna consciousness to attain these spiritual assets, and it's very encouraging. One of the most encouraging verses, I always point this out, in the 2nd chapter, where Krishna says, Neha bhikkhavanoshosti pratyabhayo navidyate svopamapyasya dharmasa trayate mahato bhayat. That in this practice of bhakti yoga, there's no loss or diminution. Even when you die, your assets go with you, because it's in your consciousness, it's in your spirit. And you're given a situation in your next life by Krishna's overseeing as a super soul, we're learning here, to give us a situation we can continue our spiritual journey if you don't become completely pure in this life. So, and then he says, even a little advancement protects one from the most fearful kind of danger. That's really what Prabhupada meant there. Mahato bayat. Bayat usually means fear, but can also mean danger, a very fearful danger. What is the most fearful danger? To lose the human form of life and go down, down, down into a dog's life, a cat's life, or an insect's life. Those are also spirit souls with external bodies. But because they performed grievous sins in the previous human life, they lose all that and they go to a very rudimentary consciousness. But then they come up, and eventually they come to human form of life. So we're enjoined. Don't waste this human form of life. There are so many verses like that. There's one that describes the human body as kind of a boat to take us across the ocean of birth and death. I mean, right next to the ocean here, you can easily see how vast it is and how dangerous it is. So, but the human body is perfectly constructed to enable us to travel across that ocean. So Krishna says, Krishna speaks this verse, Nirdehamanyam sulabam sudurlabam Klavam sukalpam gudukarnadharam mayanukuryena nabasviteritam puman bhavabdim natari sa atmaha. I don't know if you know that verse, but it's a very wonderful verse. So nir is short for nara, means human body. Deham is body. The human body is highly equipped. Adya means has all of these facilities. But what is the body? Sulabam sudurlabam. Now this is a play on words. Sulabam means easy to get. Sudurlabam means very difficult to get. So how can something be both? So the idea is that everyone gets the human body eventually, but even without trying. The soul, if you will, evolves. The consciousness evolves. But they're relatively rare. I think there's they finally reached 8 billion, they figured, estimate 8 million human beings on the planet Earth now. I remember when I was a kid, it was 2 billion, and then we hit 3 billion, So now they figured it around 8 billion. But that's the drop in the bucket compared to the amount of mosquitoes in Miami, right? And that's just Miami. In other words, there's trillions and trillions of other living entities. But we're human beings. So what's the special quality of the human being? This is another verse. Lord Krishna speaks in the 11th canto. Labdva, in the same words here, Labdva sudurlabam idam bahusam bhavante manushyam artadam anityam apiya dhira. Turnam yateta napateda namitya yavat nikshe esaya vishayakara sarva taksha. So let me break this verse down, very important verse. So he's encouraging us. He says, you've attained Labdva sudurlabam, it's difficult to attain human form, manushyam, the same word, man, manushyam. Labdvasudurlabam idam bahusambhava, after many, many births, bahusambhavante, manushyam artadam. Now this is the key word. Artadam means that it gives, da is what it means. The arta, the real goal of life, of the soul's life. Otherwise, in the lower forms, we don't have the brain to understand it. We just live according to instinct and, gradually give up that body, up, and you come to human form. But human life, we have the intelligence. So it says, manushyam artadam, but like all forms, anityam, it's not permanent, it's temporary. So one has to be dhira. This is a key word. It means sober-minded, thoughtful. Thoughtful and. So that, and then if you're really thoughtful, then you take up the next part of the verse. Turnam yateta, without wasting time. Don't waste a second. You never know when that earthquake will come, right? You have no time to waste. Immediately strive. You have to strive because we're so conditioned that our natural state is to just go for sense gratification and be conditioned. But if we get the right knowledge from transcendental books spoken by a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada, Krishna's words, then we know that we want to strive for a different way of life. So therefore, immediately strive, yateta, napate, as long as you're still alive, napate anumritya yavat. The word anumritya is very interesting. It means death is following you over the shoulder all the time. At any time it can strike. See? Anu means follow, right? Anumritya. Yavat means as long. Strive for what? Nikshayasaya. The ultimate good, the ultimate welfare for yourself and for everyone else. This word shreya is very important. And then vishayakalo sarvataksa, because after all, in all those other bodies, you've experienced every variety of sense gratification. And where has it gotten you? Another birth, old age, disease, and death, you see? Very important verse. Prabhupada would quote it quite often. So that's the value of this human form of life. So that's very important, because that's the kṣetra part. You want to know what is the kṣetra? Kṣetra means a field. But the field of activity for the soul is this body. When you think about it, we're sensing so many things, seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling. But actually, you're interacting with the different senses. The senses are perceiving something out there and causing something in the nerves, in the brain and everything. But the body itself is the field of your activities, your intimate field. So what is that constituted of? That's what he's going to describe now in text 5. No, he's introducing this, and then he'll, in the next 2 verses, he'll give a detailed description of the gross and also the subtle part of the field. In other words, it's not just the physical body, but also the subtle body that's part of our field of activity. And how to interact with it, that's what Krishna consciousness is all about. So that was, okay, that was text 4, right? And so now we should read text 5, and let's just comment there. Okay. Vishabhi Bahudagitam Chandobi Vibidhai Patak Brahmasutra Badaishchaiva Hetumodbhi Vinishchitai. That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in the Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. So now this is interesting because Krishna is the ultimate authority, but he's citing all of these previous authorities, the great rishis and saints and books, and Prabhupada will explain why. Purport: the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the highest authority in explaining this knowledge. Still, as a matter of course, learned scholars and standard authorities always give evidence from previous authorities. Krishna is explaining this most controversial point regarding the duality and non-duality of the soul and the supersoul by referring to a scripture, the Vedanta, which is accepted as an authority. First he says, this is according to different sages. That's a Rishibir. As far as the sages are concerned, besides himself, Vyasadeva, the author of the Vedanta Sutra, is a great sage, and in the Vedanta Sutra, duality is perfectly explained. And Vyasadeva's father, Parashara, is also a great sage, and he writes in his books of religiosity, Aham Tvam Chatatanye, we, you, I, and the various other living entities are all transcendental, although in material bodies. Now we have fallen into the ways of the 3 modes of material nature according to our different karma. And those 3 modes will be explained in detail in the next chapter. As such, some are on higher levels and some are in the lower nature. The higher and lower natures exist due to ignorance excuse me, and are being manifested in an infinite number of living entities. But the Supersoul, which is infallible, is uncontaminated by the 3 qualities of nature and is transcendental. Now, just a word of explanation. Prabhupada's, first language was Hindi, And of course, he was easily learned Sanskrit, it's related. And his second language was English. He learned English in the beginning of the 20th century from the English. They were occupying India. And so it's English, which is a little different than American English. Now, so the reason I'm mentioning this is this word infallible. Prabhupada always uses it to mean cannot fall down. In fact, he pronounced it that way, infallible, you know? Now, of course, infallible means you don't make any mistakes, right? You know, that's the idea. And of course, Krishna is that as well. But Prabhupada is using it, the super soul, which is infallible, meaning he never falls under the illusory energy. And so that's why he's omniscient, it's everywhere. This is Krishna himself in the heart. He's there in his representative. So that's just to keep that in mind. But the super soul, which is infallible, is uncontaminated by the three qualities of nature, three modes of nature, and is transcendental. Similarly, in the original Vedas, a distinction between the soul, the super soul, and the body is made, especially in the Katha Upanishad. There are many great sages who have explained this, and Parashara is considered principal among them. The word Chandogya refers to the various Vedic literatures. The Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, which is a branch of the Yajurveda, describes nature, the living entity, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated before, kṣetra is the field of activities. And there are two kinds of kṣetra-jña. Jña means knower. Like, from that comes the word jnana, knowledge. Kṣetra-jña, the individual living entity and the supreme living entity. As stated in the Taittiriya Upanishad 251, Brahma Pucham Pratishta, there is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord's energy known as Annamaya. Now he's going to go through different Annamaya, Pranamaya, and so forth now. Annamaya, dependence upon food for existence. This is a materialistic realization of the Supreme. Then in Pranamaya, after realizing the Supreme Absolute Truth in food, one can realize the Absolute Truth in the living symptoms or life forms. In Jnanamaya, realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. Now these are the three functions of the mind. I remember when I first read this triple understanding of the mind, it was very illuminating when you think, the mind thinks, but it also has these feelings. But then when you want to do something on those feelings, then you will an activity. And so the process of devotional service is bringing those thinking, feeling, and willing into the purview of devotional service. Thinking about Krishna and learning what does he want me to do? You know, what should I do to serve him? And then, well, the feeling usually comes last. And then willing to do it, and you're actually doing a service. And then you begin feeling some reciprocation. And now this feels good. Now I'm serving Krishna, and I'm serving the devotees, you know. And it works like that. You think about it. Your mind is always thinking, feeling, and willing. And so when that's all purified, then you're Krishna conscious. Okay. Where was I? Life symptoms. Okay, Jnanamaya. Realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. Then there is Brahman realization called Vijnanamaya as opposed to Jnanamaya. Vijnanamaya, in which the living entity's mind and life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. The next and supreme stage is Anandamaya, realization of the all-blissful nature. Thus there are 5 stages of Brahman realization which are called Brahmapucham. Out of these, the first 3, Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Jnanamaya, involve the fields of activities of the living entities. Transcendental to all these fields of activities is the Supreme Lord, who is called Anandamaya. The Vedanta Sutra also describes the Supreme by saying, Anandamaya Bhyasat. The Supreme Personality of God is by nature full of joy. To enjoy his transcendental bliss, he expands into Vijnanamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, Annamaya. In the field of activities, the living entity is considered to be the enjoyer, and different from him is the Anandamaya. That means that if the living entity decides to enjoy in dovetailing himself with the Anandamaya, then he becomes perfect. This is the real picture of the Supreme Lord as the supreme knower of the field, the living entity as the subordinate knower, and the nature of the field of activities. One has to search for this truth in the Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra. Now, I wouldn't blame you at all if you're just reading this for the first time, or even the second time or fifth time, and you wouldn't exactly know what's going on in that paragraph. It's a little mysterious. But the kind of the last part, he explains everything. This phrase, Anandamaya Vyasat, which is one of the Vedanta sutras. Sutras are little aphorisms. They're all very small, and they need explanation. Like the first aphorism is, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. And it's a call to every human being. Now that you've become a human being, now then, therefore, you're beginning a book with therefore. How is that? Therefore usually comes somewhere at the end of an argument, right? But the Vedanta Sutra itself is the very word, Vedanta means the end of all knowledge. So the understanding is you studied all these other books already. You read the Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, you see. And now, the essence of it is all Vedanta Sutra. And he's saying at first, now as a human being, you should inquire into the absolute truth, into Brahman. It's like that other verse. It's just that, now you're a human being, don't waste time, look into the ultimate truth. And so then the Vedanta Sutra doesn't waste any time. It answers the question, what is that Brahman in the second sutra? Janmadhyasya yataha, which happened to be the first words of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's why the Bhagavatam is said to be the ultimate commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. And that's why Lord Chaitanya didn't write one or have any of his followers write one at first. Even though all the other sampradayas, they had their Vedanta Sutra bhashya, their explanation. See? But then there was some objection. It was in Jaipur, and all the priests were saying, oh, you're not a real sampradaya, you don't have any Vedanta Sutra explanation or commentary. So they got back to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who was the leader at that time, but he was kind of elderly, and so he gave the task to his very learned disciple called Baladev Vijayabhushan, who also commented on the Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada dedicated the book to him. A lot of these commentaries are based on Baladev's commentary. But he sat down, he took the assignment, but he didn't feel worthy, so he went to Govinda deity there in Jaipur. Rupa Goswami is the original Govinda deity. And he prayed for 3 days, and eventually, the garland fell down, and he was praying, and the garland fell on him, and he said, okay, this is the blessing from Govinda. But he said, and he started writing it, but he said, I don't think I'm really writing this. It feels like Govinda's writing it through me, so he called it Govinda Bhashya, the Govinda's Bhashya. Very interesting. And he wrote that commentary, but it just basically is based on Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam. Do you have a question? Okay. All right. So the idea is that this Anandamaya Vyasat. This is one of the sutras, and it describes the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's there in the middle of the purport. No, near the end of the third paragraph on page 535. Do you see that? The Vedanta Sutra also describes the Supreme by saying, Anandamaya Vyasat, the Supreme Personality of God is by nature full of joy, or Ananda. Now, because we're part and parcel of Krishna, we are also by nature full of joy, full of Ananda. Now, Ananda has to be distinguished from ordinary material jubilation or sense pleasure. And the difference is that Ananda of spiritual pleasure is meant to be experienced constantly, whereas all of these sense pleasures they're very flickering, as you probably noticed. You can sit down to a nice feast of prasadam, but eventually you got to stand up. You can't enjoy it constantly, as tasty as it may be. Okay, I had my share, right? And that's true of every sense pleasure. The body always has its limits, and the mind also. But in the spirit doesn't have that limit. In the spiritual world, everything is always blissful. Varieties of bliss, exchanging of love with Krishna, you see. And that's because that's who he is. And it makes perfect sense. If you were God, and you're all powerful, why would you ever be less than full of Ananda? You don't want it to end. And he has the power to not end. But it's interesting that the Ananda is always in relation. It's a relationship. It's called rasa. He's enjoying with the gopis, and he's enjoying with his friends. As his mother, he appears like a little child, and he's naughty and all that. There's another rasa, another relationship. So there's always one or the other that Krishna is enjoying. Sometimes several at once. So that's where we belong. And because we're part and parcel of Krishna, that is our essential nature also. But we've lost that. Because we've forgotten Krishna, we've cut ourselves off, and we become enamored and absorbed in the material energy. And that means also the material body. And so we have no idea of that, so we're constantly going for the temporary pleasures. But the temporary pleasures are the source of all our misery. This is my favorite verse, practically every class I know it. You probably know this verse by now. Yehi sang sparjaja bhoga, dukkha yonaya evate, adyantamantang koteya nateshu ramate buddha. The intelligent, the Buddhas, they don't take part in that pleasure which is due to the senses contacting their sense objects. You see? And he says, O son of Kunti, such pleasures are the sources of all misery and have a beginning and an end. So the wise don't delight in them. So the next logical question is, well then what kind of pleasures can I enjoy? That's in the previous verse. He says, Bayas parsheshu asaktatma. Bayas parsheshu vindat yatma nayat sukham sab brahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam ashnute. Now those last words in that verse are like revolutionary. If they're true, then our whole efforts in the material sphere are obviously silly, crazy. And what does words mean? Sukham akshayam ashnute. Thus, he, the person who's enlightened, enjoys unbreakable happiness, unbreakable pleasure, unending pleasure. How? By always staying in contact with the Supreme Brahman within his heart. Baya means externally. Sparsheshu asaktatma. Not attract to contacting these external things. No. Vindit yatmanayat sukham. He's always enjoying the pleasure within. Krishna's there, and we can relate to him, you see, eternally. Sa yogi Bayas parshe vindit yatmanayat sukham sab brahma yoga yuktatma. Brahma is that supreme Brahman who ultimately is God, Krishna. Yukta Atma, linking the soul. Yukta is like from yoga, is linking the soul through love and devotion to the Supreme Brahman. And in this way, the enlightened, they enjoy unbreakable happiness. And see, as opposed to the next verse, Bayas Parshesu, you see, not Asaktatma, but the pleasures that come from that are to be, I love this word in English, it doesn't exactly mean that, but we'll give it a new meaning, sublimated. To sublimate the desires from gross sense gratification to enjoying one's relation with Krishna. Ultimately, he's ready he wants us to do that. That's why he speaks the Bhagavad Gita. And he also writes the Bhagavatam. You know, it's from him that's coming also. And he also has another Gita there, Uddhava Gita, in the 11th canto. He's speaking the Uddhava. So Krishna wants us, why does he take all this trouble? Because we're his beloved children. Whereas, you know, he claims us in the next chapter, beginning of the next chapter. What is it? Sarva yonisha konteya murtiyak sambhavantaya tasam brahma mahayone aham bija pradakta. I am the seed-giving father for all the living beings, you see? So we're all his children. And now we've forgotten about him, we're suffering so much in this world. So he wants us to come back. And then, so he sends his representatives, such as Prabhupada, he comes as avatar, but he only comes as Krishna, as his original self, once in a day of Brahma. I pointed this out this morning. And who remembers how long it is? I think it's, when you get into trillions, you're into his lifetime. 8,640,000,000. 640, yeah. 8,640,000,000 years is his 24-hour period for Lord Brahma. It's a long time. So Krishna just came, 5,000 years ago? It's just like a snap of the fingers. What to speak of Lord Chaitanya 500 years ago? We were practically contemporaries. So how rare is that? You see how forget the lottery, you know, I walked down to the corner here, it's $125 million, you know, anyway. Of course, we would never do that. But it's that's nothing, you know. We've already won the lottery. We just have to cash in the ticket by practicing Krishna consciousness. We're very fortunate. And that's the thing. So let's go on with this wonderful purport. It is mentioned here that the codes of the Brahma calls them codes, the sutras, of the Brahma Sutra are very nicely arranged according to cause and effect. Some of the sutras or aphorisms are Naviyat Ashute, Natma Shute, and Paratu Tat Shute. The first aphorism indicates the field of activities. The second indicates the living entity, and the third indicates the Supreme Lord, the summum bonum among all manifestations of various entities. So this would, I'm sure this would be explained if we, actually I do have a translation of that Baladev's commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. But it's not an accident that Prabhupada's name has the word Vedanta in it. What does it say? Bhakti Vedanta. His name itself is an important statement. You want the end of all knowledge? It's bhakti. It all culminates in bhakti. Not in just merging into Brahman. You know, that I'm Brahman, that's the Supreme Brahman, let me just merge into it. For a devotee, this is anathema. You know what the word anathema means? Oh, okay. The other side. There you go. Anathema means something that is horrible. You know, because if you merge into Brahman, there's no question of bhakti. Bhakti requires three things. It requires Bhagavan, the Bhakta, and the process of bhakti. None of those are there in the Brahma Jyoti, you see. So we don't want to try to give up our separate identity. You see, this is a grand illusion, and it's something that there's a whole story. Why did Shankaracharya give that commentary? You know, why did he teach that in his commentary? And it's because, the way Prabhupada described it, at a certain point in history, India was going astray and using some of the Vedas to justify cow slaughter. Because there's a place where the cow can be sacrificed, in the rituals and mantras and things, and the cow is given a new body, and like that. But it can easily devolve into cow slaughter and meat eating, and that's what's happening in India. So what happened? And they were justifying it on the Vedas. So Buddha was born. He's also an incarnation. And he had to reject the Vedas because that was what the problem was. So on the basis of his own teachings, he taught ahimsa, and that became prominent in India for some time. So, but for the ultimate good of the authority of the Vedas had to be reestablished, and that's why Madhvacharya. That's why Shankaracharya came, because he was preaching the covered Buddhism in the form of Mayavad on the basis of the Vedas, namely Vedanta Sutra. So he was doing the service of the Lord. He was sent, but ultimately that had to be also defeated by the personalists. So Mayavad philosophy, and that's why you find in Prabhupada's books oftentimes this argument against Mayavad. And so. So now Krishna will explain. If you stick with the Bhagavad Gita as it is, you'll be protected. No Mayavad influence. right at the beginning in his introduction makes it very clear. All right, let's do. Oh, okay, it's getting a little late, but I think we can finish this one. Mahabhutyana hankaro buddhirabhyaktamevacha Indriyani dasaikam cha panchachendriya gocharaha ichadveshat sukham dukkham sangadas chetanadviti etad chetram samasena savikaram udaritam. The five great elements, false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses and the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms, and convictions. All these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. Purport: from all the authoritative statements of the great sages, the Vedic hymns and the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra, the components of this world can be understood as follows. First, there are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are the 5 great elements, Mahabhuta. Then there are false ego, intelligence, and the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of nature. Then there are 5 senses for acquiring knowledge, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. Then 5 working senses, voice, legs, hands, anus, genitals. Then above the senses there is the mind, which is within and which can be called the sense within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. Then there are the 5 objects of the senses, smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. Now, the aggregate of these 24 elements is called the field of activity. This was Arjun's original question. What is that kṣetra? You see? This is one of the things. So he's explaining in detail. If one makes an analytical study of these 24 subjects, then he can very well understand the field of activity. Then there are desire, hatred, happiness, and distress, which are interactions, representations of the 5 great elements in the gross body. The living symptoms, represented by consciousness, and convictions are the manifestation of the subtle body, mind, ego, and intelligence. These subtle elements are included within the field of activities. The 5 great elements are a gross representation of the false ego, which in turn represents the primal stage of false ego, technically called the materialistic conception, or tamasa buddhi, intelligence and ignorance. This further represents the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of material nature. The unmanifested modes of material nature are called pradhan. One who desires to know the 24 elements in detail, along with their interactions, should study the philosophy in more detail. In the Bhagavad Gita, a summary only is given. The body is the representation of all these factors, and there are changes of the body, which are 6 in number. The body is born, it grows, it stays for some time, it produces byproducts, then it begins to decay, and at last stage it vanishes. Therefore, the field is a non-permanent material thing. However, the kṣetra-jña, the knower of the field, its proprietor, is different. Now, I'm not going to be able to pretend that I can explain all of these interactions and these things. This is a bit of a mystery. But the idea is we have this field that has gross and subtle elements, and it's an incredible construction. We didn't create it. I mean, for me, one of the things that you want proof of the existence of God, just contemplate your own body. Okay, how complicated it is, delicate, everything has to be just right. Obviously, it's produced by a supreme intelligence. I mean, it's to me anyway. So that's, I mean, we should understand how all these things are working, but I wouldn't try to explain it, so much. All right, so it's 8:10. I'm going to give you a little poem because that's I always do that. That's what I do. So here's one that I was thinking of today. There's no Sanskrit behind this, but it's those of you who have seen the paintings, the ISKCON paintings. There's a beautiful painting of Krishna sitting in the forest on a very comfortable seat there, and there's a little dove on his hand, and there's a swan in front of him. There's a deer over here and a little cow. You see, So this poem is based on that painting. Okay, the sweetness of Sri Krishna's form beguiles. Still sweeter is his face, like autumn moon. But sweeter than the sweetest is his smile, whose luscious beauty makes the gopis swoon. Govinda's beauty captivates the doves, the swans, the deer, the cows, and every tree. Indeed, in Braja, every creature loves Sri Krishna and is drowned in ecstasy. That all-enchanting land is paradise, our home where we may dwell eternally. Most welcome there are those who pay the price to learn to love Sri Krishna perfectly. Hare Krishna. Okay, let us adjourn now and prepare for the curtains to open, and we'll have a little kirtan. Radha Giridhari, their good night kirtan before they take rest. And you're all welcome tomorrow if you have time. We have Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night. This is only Monday.
Tuesday and Wednesday?
Yes, 3 nights a week for the last 35 years. Actually, we used to do Thursday, but now they have the Thursday lounge and everything. Krishna. All right. Okay, so the 8 to 12 here, a very important section. They give the 24 elements of knowledge. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.